Hey everybody, what's going on? Hexlex here with another Master Duel video for y'all. So today we're going to be covering Branded Despia. I've seen a lot of comments asking how the build has changed since the new cards have been released, so I'm sure a lot of you are pretty eager to see what's all been included. Well, you can actually see already how the build has been changed. I could have seen it yesterday if you checked out my video where we showed off all the builds that we've got going into Season 12 here, but now we're going to be talking specifically about Branded Despia. So as far as new cards that have been included, for those of you who didn't see that last video, oh, I'm sorry, actually, by the way, before we jump into the content of the video, definitely want to make sure I shout out the Patreon real quick. If you'd like to see more daily Master Duel content in addition to what's posted here on the channel, feel free to click the link in the description to check out my Patreon page. There, you will find even more daily Master Duel content. Content that's not featured on the channel, previews for content that will be on the channel, and a whole bunch of other perks there. Your contributions are definitely appreciated, and again, you will get some more content for it there. But in any case, like I was saying, Branded Despia here. So as far as what has changed, obviously the major change is the inclusion of Branded Expulsion, and of course, Eido, the Supreme Magical Force. Before we get too much into that, I'll talk real quick about Albolentus, the Abyss Dragon. We've also included this in the extra deck as well. This card is fairly useful for countering dragons in general, but especially Dragon Link. You'll notice that something about this card is that the materials say Fawn of Albaz plus one or more dragons, 1+ dragon monsters. Not only that, but Albolentus also has its own kind of like super polysemy condition built in. So you don't even actually have to use Fallen of Albaz's effect in order to go into Albolentus, which is particularly good against Dragon Links, which often ends on Boral End plus Boar Load plus potentially other negates as well. What you can do, from what I've read, I haven't actually tried this yet, but from what I've read, you can actually just set the Fallen of Albaz, just set it to your field, and then summon the Albolentus kind of kaiju style. So, because if you try to normal summon Albaz and activate its effect is just going to get negated, and it might get negated and destroyed potentially. So, to be fair, Borload and Borland, neither of those negate and destroy, they only negate, but your opponent could still have some other kind of negate on board. Like maybe a Baron or something. I guess Dragon Link doesn't usually run Baron. Regardless, anyway, the main point is that this card is really, really good. It's more or less a board-wide kaiju against Dragon Link. It also gains an additional attack for every material used, so it's not only like a kaiju, it can then sometimes even single-handedly OTK them. It's also potentially useful for sending from the extra deck to the graveyard to add either Polymerization or Branded Fusion if you're like out of Albions, or if you like really need specifically Poly for some reason. You can use the, not Albion, you can use the Albolentus to grab that, sending it with Mirror Jade if you need to. Now, as far as Branded Expulsion into Eido goes, a lot of you already know about this. It's certainly been all over the subreddit the last few days, but for those of you who are unaware, basically, Branded has kind of another combo it can go into that doesn't require it to do anything that it isn't already doing, actually. So the idea is that you do your normal combo, right? But when you activate Branded Fusion, instead of sending the, the Albaz plus Despian Tragedy to search ad libitum, you instead send Albaz plus Eido, the Supreme Magical Force. You then summon your Lubellion, do your play into Mirror Jade. The thing is, though, when you activate Mirror Jade to banish Aluber, or whatever, random extra monsters on your field, instead of searching up the Branded in red, you're instead going to search the Branded Expulsion. Then, during your opponent's draw phase, or whenever during their turn, but it's safest to do it during the draw phase, you can flip up Branded Expulsion, tribute your Mirror Jade, and then summon the Eido to your opponent's side of the field. Now, the first sentence here for Eido that you cannot summon monsters is going to apply to your opponent, effectively really just locking them out of the duel. And actually, something to know about Eido that is not readily apparent. Your opponent actually is not able to set monsters either. Now, I know it doesn't say that on the card, but Eido, the Supreme Magical Force, and this has been the case since it got printed in the TCG way back in 2009, is one of those really weird cards that's actually literally worded differently between the TCG and OCG, and actually functions differently between the two. So Master Duel follows OCG rules, where your opponent cannot set cards either, and I believe the OCG text actually does specify that. Here in Master Duel, at least in like the English version, we have the TCG text which only says you cannot summon monsters, but I believe in the TCG you can actually set monsters while Ido is on your opponent's side of the board. So it's really weird. It's really weird that this card has the TCG text, but functions with the OCG functionality. But yeah, this card is definitely a nasty Floodgate either way. Now, there is actually a different Floodgate you could potentially play as well if you wanted to, and that's Ra's Disciple. You could also send this with Branded Fusion and summon it to your opponent's side of the field with Branded Expulsion. Because as you can see, while this card is on the field, you cannot special summon monsters except by the effect of Ra's Disciple. There are a couple of reasons why I'm playing Ido instead, though. The main reason is honestly actually that it's dark. And so it's easier to send off of Branded Fusion on turn 1 to go into Lubellion. If you wanted to send Ra's Disciple, which is light, you would have to make like either Albion or Masquerade or something of that nature, and then you wouldn't be able to necessarily set your combo up. Like you wouldn't be able to go to Lubellion and then Mirror Jade for Branded Expulsion. So the other reason to play Ido is, again, that Ido stops all summons and sets, including normal summons. So this will actually stop, like, Flandres, for example. Now, there is actually a potential drawback to playing Ido over Ra's Disciple, being that Ido has an effect where if it's destroyed by a card effect and sent to the graveyard, it's special summoned during the next standby phase and then blows up all of your other monsters. So if your opponent actually manages to destroy this by a card effect while it's on their field, it's pretty much game over for you instead of them. This is going to be very rare, though, because you have to consider they're still not able to summon monsters. So really the most common ways that they would blow up their own Ido would be by like Dark Hole or Torrential Tribute. Torrential would even be fine, I think, because then it would come back during the next standby phase, so you would still have the rest of your turn to play out and win before Ido comes out and wrecks you. But in any case, yeah, I think those answers are like few and far enough between where it'll be fine. I think it's fine to play Ido over Ra's Disciple. Again, it's also dark, so going through Lubellion, much easier than trying to make something with Ra's Disciple and still set up the Branded Expulsion. Now, I'm not even necessarily sure that this is like what you want to always be doing turn 1, because the thing to note about this is that if you do this setup, you're not going to be able to set up your Branded Red into Guardian Chimera, because obviously you're sending the Ido instead of the Despian Tragedy. Without Tragedy, you can't get Ad Libitum, and then you can't, reestablish your Mirror Jade. That's actually the other thing, too, is this combo. You don't get Mirror Jade, and you don't get Guardian Chimera, at all, but instead you make it so your opponent can't summon monsters. So there is a bit of, risk-reward to it, kind of trying to determine, which I guess, opening board is better to go for. On turn 1 can be a bit difficult. I think for me, I'm going to mostly... I don't know, actually. It's really going to depend on the hand most of the time. If you open, Branded Fusion, for example, then you could just search for Branded Expulsion, and then you could go for, you could have, all sides of the combo in that regard. But I don't know. It's interesting. It's I don't know. I'll have to do a lot more testing to determine whether going for Ido consistently turn 1 is worth it, or whether you should just stick for the Guardian Chimera setup. Definitely let me know what you think in the comments below there. Another actually relatively minor, not about minor actually, it's fairly major change that I've made to this iteration is I decided to include Branded Lost and Tri-Brigade Mercurier once again, taking out Dramaturge and just trying these out as tech instead. So I've been liking them a lot. I like having the extra monster negate during the opponent's turn. It's not a matter of not having Branded Lost. I did actually pull this even way back when I pulled all the other branded stuff, but for me it was more just that I didn't have room for it, honestly, but I just wanted to try it out. Like I said, it's been good enough so far that I've been liking it quite a bit, so... Okay, I think that's everything I wanted to talk about the actual build. Now, let's break it down card by card and then jump into some gameplay. So we're playing 2 Despian Tragedy, 3 Maxx C, 3 Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, 2 Edge Imp Chain, 1 Fairy Tale Snow, 2 Fallen of Albaz, 3 Alibur the Jester of Despia, 1 Tri-Brigade Mercurier, 1 Ido the Supreme Magical Force, 1 Ad Libitum of Despia, 1 Nibiru the Primal Being, 2 Polymerization, 1 Foolish Burial, 2 Fright for Patchwork, 3 Branded Fusion, 1 Branded Lost, 2 Super Polymerization, 2 Called by the Grave, 1 Crossout Designator, 2 Branded Opening, 2 Branded in Red, 1 Infinite Impermanence, and then finally 1 Branded Expulsion. Extra deck will have 1 Starving Venom Fusion Dragon, 1 Predaplant Dragos Stapelia, 1 Titaniclad the Ash Dragon, 2 Albion the Branded Dragon, 1 Despian Coratus, 2 Masquerade the Blazing Dragon, 2 Mirrorjade the Iceblade Dragon, 2 Lubellion the Searing Dragon, 1 Albolunatus the Abyss Dragon, and then finally 2 Guardian Chimera. So there is the list, and now let's take a look at some gameplay. So this first game here is going to be against Subterror Guru Control, or Guru Control is more what I just call it. It's going to be that stun deck that flips up Subterror Guru a lot to get their Omni Negate hand trap. You know how it goes. So I decided to use this game as one of my games where I test out the the new opening line of summoning the Ido to the opponent's board, and we will see here, I guess, kind of some proof that Ido does in fact stop your opponent from setting monsters as well. So I'm just going to summon the Alibur, like I said, to get the Branded Fusion. So pretty standard so far, except for the fact that, like I mentioned in the profile, we're using the Ido plus Albaz in order to make Lubellion there. So Lubellion's effect is not going to activate, making the Mirrorjade like we usually do. But this time when we use Mirrorjade to banish Alibur, instead of getting Branded in Red set up with the Albion during the end phase, we're going to set the Branded Expulsion. Of course, I'll throw down the Super Poly as well. So it is a little bit riskier. I do think this is definitely a riskier setup. It's definitely got a better payoff, obviously, being able to summon the opponent's monster. Now, my opponent uses Callbite on the Mirrorjade here for some reason, and I wonder, I don't know this actually, because it says special summon both monsters, one on each field. If they had Callbite the Ido here, I don't think that I actually would have been able to resolve my Branded Expulsion. Although, I don't know, because it can still summon them from Banish anyway, so I think that actually still would have worked. It's funny, I was actually really eager to see what would have happened here when they activated the Callbite. I was like, oh, let's see if this actually resolves, but then they banished the Mirrorjade instead, so. Anyway, yeah, I'll just summon Ido to my opponent's board, and then I even actually also get another Alibur Search as well, so that is another cool thing that you get with the Branded Expulsion in addition to the Ido locking your opponent down. So they're terraforming for Hidden City. I'm like, that's fine. I thought when they played Terraforming, I was like, oh, it's Numeron, Sweet Justice, summoning the Ido against them, but so yeah, even though they searched the Subterror Guru, they didn't set it. Obviously, they would have set it if they, because they searched it specifically, but they're not able to. And I honestly felt a little bad for my opponent there, because it probably read the text, you cannot summon monsters, and assumed, rightfully so, they can still set a monster. So I really hope Konami updates the text on Ido, if they don't just ban it, honestly. Although really, to be fair though, even if Ido gets banned, you can still Expulsion the Ra's Disciple, or you could actually still use Branded Expulsion to summon an Artifact Scythe as well to your own board to lock your opponent out of extra deck there too. So there are a couple of different options, I guess, even if Ido does get banned. But alright, from here I'm just going to throw out the Branded Fusion. Opponent's got a There Can Only Be One, but that actually doesn't really stop Branded Despia from being able to make plays, and it's certainly not going to stop me from finding lethal here. I'm going to use the Branded Fusion on the Albion. I know I can use Albion to then summon Mirrorjade, because Mirrorjade is actually a worm, not a dragon, unlike all the other fusions, which for this case is actually really, really nice. But yeah, you can see it's a worm, not a dragon. So even though there can only be one on board, I still got a Fiend, a Fairy, a Dragon, and a Worm. And I can even use Super Poly to summon a Plant to Dragos Stapelia for more damage here to finish off the opponent. And like I said, boom, there's the Dragos Stapelia to end the duel. Oh, they've got one more, they got one final battle there, but that doesn't obviously do anything. So yeah, that just wanted to show off one game there where we get the new opening, and you can see just how, I mean, that's not even just how disgusting the deck is, because all we really stopped there was the Subterror Guru. Like, but for other decks, you know, you're stopping all of their plays. Like, again, that's Flanderies, or like any combo deck, you're just stopping them all together. It's pretty gross. I'm not gonna lie, it's pretty disgusting. But let's take a look at the next game. Okay, so our next duel here is going to be against Vaylance, actually pronouncing the archetype's name correctly instead of, what was I calling it before, Valiance or something? I don't know, but Yeah, playing against Valance here. Going second this time, don't open any disruption. If I'd gone first, this would have been a pretty decent hand, but fortunately the opponent just passes to me without doing anything, so we get to go first plus here, as I like to call it, when the opponent has no opening response. Now, just because our opponent didn't play anything doesn't mean we're necessarily, like, in the clear. We do still have to be mindful of disruption, because if your opponent opens without playing anything at all, or just, like, sets one card and passes, it's pretty likely they've got a lot of, like, disruption in hand. So I'm thinking about, obviously, Ash Blossom, trying to bait that out as much as possible here. Thaler, Imperm, Maxi, Nibiru, just keeping all those cards in mind as I move forward here. Sure enough, my opponent does have an Ash Blossom against the Branded Fusion. You might be wondering why the Branded Lost didn't prevent that. Branded Lost does not work against Ash Blossom because Ash Blossom negates the effect of the card, but not the activation of it. Or it's not that it negates the effect, it's something like that. It's that it negates, like, not the activation, but it negates that effect, yeah. And Branded Lost only stops cards that, it only prevents your opponent from stopping the activation of the card, not the effect. So, in case you were wondering. So I'll just summon a Masquerade here, set a Branded Opening, and pass. Opponent's going to lead with the Raigeki, but that's totally fine because I've got a Branded Opening in Graveyard. I could have honestly just let the Masquerade die anyway. I thought about it, just because it can come back if my opponent does summon from the extra deck, but obviously I still want them to be able to, like, pay life points as well. So I'll just keep it on the board. I'll use the Branded Opening here. There's kind of no reason not to. Alright, so the opponent has this Scion, the Valance Archer here, which has got one of the more interesting effects I've ever seen. It's like a coin toss effect, but, like, both ends are kind of good. So, like, if they hadn't negated my monster, they would have, you know, destroyed it, and or they would have halved its attack, and if they had destroyed it, they would have bounced it. So that's cool. I like the idea of coin flip effects like that. I think that should be done more often. But yeah, even though my card got destroyed, obviously Albert is going to come back. And then I guess at that point my opponent just... That was apparently the straw that broke the camel's back for my opponent, and that's a little bit too much for them, and they end up conceding at that point. So let's go into the next game here. So this next duel here is going to be a mirror match where we're going to be playing against another Branded Despia deck. I think we have another mirror match coming up at some point in this video as well. I think there were two, but anyway, we'll see. Looks like the opponent is going to take the first turn here. This time we opened Maxi, so we do have, like, some kind of a play here. Rest of our hand's looking pretty solid, especially this Albaz for going second. Now, unfortunately, Maxi is actually not the best against Branded Despia. Like, we'll still obviously get a few draws here, but the thing with Maxi is that, like, you typically want it to either stop your opponent's turn or, like, if your opponent keeps going, draw you into the Nibiru. But when you're using Maxi against Branded Despia, it kind of sucks because, like, neither thing is really going to happen. Like, your opponent's going to keep drawing. You'll get a couple of draws, which will be nice, but, you know, even if you draw into the Nibiru, you won't get a chance to play it because Branded Despia just does not really ever summon that much on turn one. So, you know, it's like I would have much rather had Ash Blossom or Veiler or Imperm. Those are definitely the disruption tools you want to have against Branded Despia. Maxi and Nibiru tend to be not quite as good against this deck. We did still get ultimately a +1 off of it, so that is nice, but again, I would have much rather just stop my opponent from doing plays at all. So I'm going to start by normal summoning the Fallen of Albaz here, and I'm actually going to use that as my bait in order to bait out the Mirror Jade effect here. But not only did I bait out the Mirror Jade effect, I also got to discard Edge and Chain doing that as well. Now I can use the Patchwork to search up a Poly, as well as other Edge and Chain, but most importantly a Polymerization, and then I can use that to make the rest of my plays moving forward. I'll fuse the Albaz and the Despian Tragedy to go for the Lubellion here. It's funny, I actually ended up with the materials to do the Branded Fusion play, but fusing from hand instead of deck, so... here I'll just end up adding another Albert because I don't have another target. I'll get a Mercourier, which is nice, so if my opponent does happen to have Disruption in hand, I'll have something for that for the with the Mercourier here. I did notice they did pitch the Nibiru, which is nice. I don't have to worry about that, and you know, also again makes sense. Let's say I don't know actually if they'd realized at that point that they were playing the mirror match. I'm trying to think actually. I don't know, but. In any case here, I'm going to go ahead and activate the Mirror Jade effect. My opponent's got an Imperm. I'm a little surprised they didn't Imperm the Lubellion. I think they should have done that, honestly, because now I get to still send from the extra deck, so... Opponent's got a Super Poly here, which is a little scary, but actually not that bad. We will have to deal with the Stragostapelia, but I've got a lot of advantage on my opponent moving forward from here, and I'll get to destroy the Stragostapelia with Mirror Jade during the end phase, and then I can set up the Branded in red as well. So advantage is definitely the name of the game when it comes to this deck, so being up on advantage in the mirror match is definitely where you want to be. So I decided to flip up this Branded in red, getting back the Albaz. I was going to try to make Guardian Chimera here, in order to blow up the face down Branded Fusion, but then I realized, like, oops, I don't have any monsters on board, so I can't actually do that. So I decided to just, you know, pivot and make Lubellion instead. Yeah, improvising mostly. I'll make Lubellion, but I'm going to get the Mirror Jade back with the Ad Libitum, so I actually won't be making a Mirror Jade with the Lubellion. I think I ended up making a Masquerade here, if I recall correctly. Or was that a Titaniclad? I think it might have been a Titaniclad. I really don't remember, actually. Survey says it was, oh, Dragostapelia. I was wrong on both accounts. Of course, yeah, of course it'd be Dragostapelia. Just makes the most sense to have that for the opponent's turn here. So now I've got a whole bunch of disruption. I have 2 negates and the Mirror Jade banished. So like this Albion, for example, I could just go ahead and negate that with a Dragostapelia. And then, yeah, I'll still have a Mercourier and a Mirror Jade moving forward for the rest of this turn. Now, the opponent does have a Fairy Tail Sinnoh, so the Albion is going to end up resolving. This is actually a total waste of a Mercourier. Actually, you know what? This is not a total waste of a Mercourier. It kind of looks like it is, because you're like, oh, well, they can just use Fairy Tail Sinnoh's effect again, right? They can, but in doing so, they've now banished all the stuff out of their graveyard, and they actually can't fuse for Albion. So, I did actually manage to get what I originally wanted by quote-unquote negating Albion here, but rather than actually negating Albion's effect, I just took away... I set my opponent up for a scenario where they took away all their own materials. It's funny, actually, if they hadn't used Fairy Tail Sinnoh's effect again and just let it get negated, they would have still gotten the Albion Fusion summon, and I would have been in a little bit more of an awkward spot there. Definitely would have regretted using my Mercourier if that had happened, but the way that things ended up playing out, you know, I was more than satisfied with the results. So, yeah, at this point, it's like, my opponent doesn't have anything at all. I really could just summon all the things in attack mode and swing for game, but I don't know. There's always this part of me that's so paranoid, because I've played this game long enough that there have been enough scenarios where I think I have lethal, but then I don't, for some like random, completely unforeseen reason. So that's a lot of the reason why I like to, like, you know, put an egregious amount of damage on board. But you also got to be careful, mindful about that sometimes. But anyway, yeah, there's that game. So let's just jump straight into the next one. Okay, so yeah, we did actually have another Branded Despia mirror. That's what we're going to be looking at now. This opponent was actually playing quite a bit of the newer stuff, including Albaz the Ashen, which I touched on this in my like deck overview video yesterday, but I did want to include Albaz the Ashen in this build just to try it out, but I just could not find room within these 40 cards to keep the deck down to 40 cards. Because even then, like, as much as I wanted to try Albaz the Ashen and Dogmatica, or not, why do I keep wanting to call it Dogmatica? Branded Banishment. There were just, like I said, other cards. There were other cards I wanted to play above, like, even those as well. Like, I would like to include Valor in the build again. I'd like to include Dramaturge in the build again if possible, so... Like I said, the Branded Banishment is nice, but I just don't know that it's needed. I don't think that's super needed, honestly. But, you know, I've been wrong when making assertions like that before. I'm obviously still very much open to being wrong. So, opponent's going for a fairly standard opening combo here. They are not doing the Branded Expulsion line. Thankfully, I would not have an out for it. They are just going to make the Mirror Jade plus Branded in red for the Guardian Chimera setup. Alright, going to lead with the Patchwork here, see if they have an Ash Blossom. Not only just see if they have an Ash Blossom, but I actually need this Poly fusing away the Despian Tragedy just to get my plays set up here. I'm going to go for a Masquerade here with the Tragedy. I'm going to use Tragedy to then add the Aluber. I'll chain block with the Edgem Chain to add the Fright for Patchwork. Opponent immediately fires off their Mirror Jade on my Masquerade, which I think is a huge misplay. They definitely should have waited. I'm trying to figure out what would have been the best thing to banish. I don't know off the top of my head, actually, but whatever, we still got a normal summon, so I'll just summon this Aliber and then search out the Branded Fusion. At this point, I've checked enough for Ash Blossom, and even if they do have it, I've got a Call by the Grave. But I was just about to say, I really wanted to save this Call by for the Branded in red, which I do actually get to end up doing. So the way I played that turn out there, I wanted to resolve the Despian Tragedy as early as possible, so that way I could Call by their Despian Tragedy that they would inevitably get back with Branded in red here, because it's really the only thing they can get back. And then, yeah, and then from there I can just prevent them from going into Guardian Chimera at all. They've also already used their Mirror J, so now I don't have to worry about that moving forward. So this is why it really pays to be like mindful of your disruption. I mean, obviously they couldn't have done anything about the Call by, but I guess I'm referring more to my opponent kind of using their Mirror Jade. I feel a little bit loosely there. Excuse me. I'm really trying to think though, like what else would you have used it against, to be fair? Maybe like my Mirror Jade, but it's hard. I don't know. This matchup's tricky. It's why Branded Despia is so good. It's just so resilient to just about everything. Like, it refuels itself by ridiculous advantage gain. It's resilient to disruption, whether mid or even post combo. Oh, this game. That's right. So I actually ended this game pretty interestingly. You might have noticed there that I went for the... Well, obviously you've noticed I went for the Starving Venom Fusion Dragon. With the Albion there. I actually totally forgot when I was fusion summoning this Albion that, you know, the materials would be, like, banished. Or rather, when I used Branded in red, rather, I forgot that the materials would be banished. So, I didn't end up making, like, exactly what I wanted to here. With this in particular, I think I go for the Despian Coratus, but I ended up realizing, like, wait, this is actually still lethal because of that 600 chip damage that I got in with the Masquerade there. Basically what my plan is I obviously already stole the monster's attack with Starving Venom Fusion Dragon, but what I can do now is actually use Despian Coratus' effect to drop the Aliber attack down to 0, use Starving Venom's effect to copy Mirror Jade's effect, banish Mirror Jade with Starving Venom, then I attack the 0 attack Aliber with Coratus, and I have to do that because the monster you summon with Branded Red can't attack directly, and then I can finish my opponent with a direct attack from Starving Venom Fusion Dragon. So, you know, initially I was kind of stressing out when I was playing this turn out because I was like, crap, I don't think I have lethal, and I can't really do anything about my opponent's board, and they have an advantage on me, but we actually did manage to find a lethal somehow in all of that, so... GG's to Calm there for the mirror match. Now we have one more game to watch, so let's just go ahead and jump straight into it. And finally, our last game for this video is going to be against DDD, which is, this is my first time playing against the deck ever since I picked up the deck myself, so now I won't be nearly as lost when I play against this matchup, and I'll actually be able to figure out what my opponent's doing here. Okay, so they're going to start with the Kepler. And I decided to throw out a Veiler here, which I actually think was a mistake. I know I just got done saying, like, oh, I play this matchup, I know. Excuse me, I know how to play against it, but I really should have saved the Veiler for the Gilgamesh, because it would have been very easy for them to just have a Dark Contract, the Gate in hand anyway, and then play it here. But my opponent ended up having a Call by, so I guess it didn't really matter either way, but the correct play would have been to hold the Veiler until the Gilgamesh got dropped. So yeah, this is a pretty standard Kepler opening line, summoning the Griffin here. I'll fire off the Maxi, of course, in response to the Griffin's effect, but here they would then go into the Gilgamesh of the 0 to 6 scale, bring it back for a Caesar, and then a Tell, then go into the second Gilgamesh, and then just, basically this would end in Machinex plus the Wave King Caesar, which would be pretty bad for me if they ended on that, because, you know, obviously, having multiple effects, especially some that get negated, is not ideal for this deck, as it's not for many decks. They will still get the Machinex here, ultimately giving me a +1 on the Maxi, but I think that's fine. Alright, so I'm going to start by activating Fright for Patrick. My opponent, in response, is going to activate Dark Contract with the Eternal Darkness, which is annoying. They actually should have saved this, I think. Well, you know what, to be fair, I could have had Super Poly, which is why they flipped it up then. So that actually was a good time to flip it up, but this particular Dark Contract is going to keep me from using monsters on board as materials for summons. This is actually a really annoying Floodgate, and one I didn't even really know about, so I might actually consider playing it myself, but I guess your opponent can still Link Summon under it, and also what I'm going to do here is your opponent can still Fusion Summon, just not using monsters on board. That is definitely going to keep me from making a significant number of plays, though. Like, don't get me wrong. Like this Lubellion, for example, isn't going to be able to summon a Mirror Jade because I can't use the Lubellion that's on board as a material for a Fusion Summon. So instead I have to make, what is this going to be? Oh, just another Albion. Or not another Albion, but just an Albion period. Yeah, which definitely sucks. So, I would have loved to be able to just Albaz my opponent's Machinex and make a Mirror Jade that way, but not going to be that easy thanks to my opponent's Floodgate here. I'll still get the Albion effect, and I'll go for a Titaniclad here in order to run over their Deus Machinex. Yeah, the Branded in red is actually not going to be super useful here either because, you know, I can't go for Guardian Well, I can potentially go for Guardian Chimera, I just can't use anything on the field as a material, so I'm not going to be able to blow anything on the board. I'm not going to be able to blow anything up that's on the board. Opponent's got a Feather Duster here. I'll just chain both of my cards. I'll call by the Gilgamesh just because it's the only thing in their graveyard. Obviously, they're not going to use Gilgamesh's effect this turn, but I'll just do it just to do it. But more importantly, I'm going to chain the Branded in red, so that way I can get that off, and I'll just make a Masquerade here. I would have liked to have made something better, but obviously with the threat of the Branded in red being destroyed, I'm just going to use it or lose it here. Same with the call by again. Banishing Gilgamesh doesn't actually do anything here, like 99.9% of the time, but you know, better to use it than just have it be destroyed for no reason. Looks like my opponent is teching some of the Valance field spells in the DDD build. Pretty interesting tech there to move your own Pendulum monsters up to the main monster zone to be used for a combo there. I don't think I necessarily have the room in my build to try something like that, but it's still an interesting tech choice there. Now my opponent is going to go ahead and just, you know, go for the Caesar and the Tell, but they can't really do anything with these cards by themselves. They would need another DDD monster on board in order to go for the Gilgamesh to send the Tell to the graveyard in order to set stuff up. Which, to be fair, they do actually get with the field spell here, but I guess I'm just a little confused why they didn't end up going for Gilgamesh. Instead, they just go for Machinex. They could have set up, like, a Necro Slime in the graveyard and potentially made like one of the fusion monsters, but they actually end up going for Zeus rather than Machinex, which I don't know how I feel about that. I feel like it might have been better just to stay on Machinex because, well, I guess to be fair, they don't have the 2 scale set up, so the Start Contract got turned off, which is probably why they felt fine going for Zeus. So yeah, so here I'm just going to use the Valance field spell just to more or less bait out a Zeus destruction, which it does, so that's cool. That will allow me to get the Alarib back, which will negate the Zeus. It won't be a problem moving forward, and then as soon as Zeus gets negated and Branded Fusion gets activated, my opponent just concedes, as they realize it's over at that point. So yeah, there are the games there. Let's go ahead and move now to the outro. Alright, want to once again thank everybody, as always as ever, for watching all the way to the very end like this. That very much means a lot to me. It's a great way to support the channel as well. Comments, another great way to support the channel, and also mean a lot to me because I definitely want to know what you think of this build, what you think of Branded Expulsion into Ido in general. I'm sure I can guess what a lot of you feel about that already, but it is a pretty gross combo. It's a very gross combo, actually. I don't know if something is going to end up getting done about Branded Expulsion or about Ido, but I guess we'll have to see moving forward. Konami's been pretty good with Master Duel ban lists and kind of addressing problem plays like this so far. We did just have the Barrier Statue banned, so I guess we'll see. Yeah, oh, and then this is the other thing, of course, I always need to plug is, if you feel like supporting the channel by additional means, definitely feel free to check out that Patreon link is going to be in the description there. So you can always support the channel, but also get more daily Yu-Gi-Oh! Content by subscribing there as well. But I think that's going to go ahead and do it for this video. So without further ado, this is Xlex. I'm signing out, and I hope you have a fantastic day.